Welcome, everyone. This is Simeon Wong from Elevate.Strategy. Glad you can join us on a Friday afternoon. It's great to see all of you. If you are going to be watching this live coming in or post-broadcast, I want to welcome all of you. And you're more than welcome to kind of send in your questions, comments, meant to be an open dialogue. And hopefully we'll have a really great session today. I know we will, because we've got a great guest coming up. So today's topic on this part of Leadership Live is leadership from inside out. And for those of you who have read up on different aspects of leadership in this modern age, you know that there's a lot of emphasis on servant leadership or leading from the heart, leading authenticity. And leadership from inside out truly is encapsulating a lot of the spirit of that. And today, we have a wonderful guest with us, Wendy Knight Agard. She'll introduce herself in a second, and here to talk about not only her career journey, but also a book that she's recently published, a very exciting book, and I can't wait to hear her talk about it. But first, just a quick update. We have a quick lineup of guests coming up that are wonderful. I'm going to send out a list of all the guests that I've booked up until the middle of July. There's going to be from marketing, from finance, from IT. So I invite you to join in the discussion come in the weekends. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Wendy, and I'll pull her up in a second. But Wendy is an everyday genius and a doctor of Heilkunst medicine. She'll explain what that is, because I'm not even too sure what that is. But she enjoys helping others, and she's built a career really around that. A lot of her time is spent on coaching, having a coaching team at Shopify. And on top of that, her busy schedule, she's also a TEDx speaker, a fellow TEDx speaker of mine, and also an author as well. She talks about having a delicate dance that occurs between that intersect of emotions, improving our experience. And she'll talk in a second, obviously. Aside from her day job, she's also an author, and she told me that she began this book back in 2014. I guess the inspiration came to her then, and a lot of things have happened since then. So it's taken her, 6 or 7 years to get this on the bookshelves, but I'm glad that she did. So what do I'm just gonna bring her in, and Wendy, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming and joining us.
Thanks, Simeon. Great to be here. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. So, Wendy, I'd like to start off by asking my guests a very simple question. And this is something that I was once asked in an interview, and that is, what book title or movie title would best describe your career journey?
That's a tough one. The first one that comes to mind is Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump. I would kind of, speak to Forrest Gump and maybe mix it with something like Revolutionary Road with Kate Winslet. Gotcha. If we could kind of mix those two movies. Forrest Gump, because he did a lot of different things, right? He did, he ran a marathon. He was a crab fisherman. All these things that he did. Yep. And he kind of moved through the world in a way that made sense to him. Right. But the reason I wouldn't say only Forrest Gump is that he did that without intention. And so I'd mix in Revolutionary Road, because for those of you that have seen that story, it's Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. Right. And they start this life. I think it takes place in the 50s or 60s, and they start this life in the suburbs, and they have this grand idea, all of their dreams that we all have when we're young, and maybe when we're deciding to live with a partner or get married. And then they kind of fall into we'll call it the typical routine. They kind of fall asleep and let go of their dreams, and kind of has a sad ending, that movie. But if I could put the two of them together, if I could put that with Forrest Gump, I'd say mine has a happy ending. And I've been able to do a lot of different things, but with the intention of someone who had these ideas when they were younger. So that's what I'd say. I'd put those two movies together. Are you still
Can you
there?
hear me?
It looks like I lost
Yeah.
you on the screen there for a minute. Are you still there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Well, I was just
Okay.
asking you, were you as clumsy as Forrest Gump, do you think?
I'd like to think that I'm not that clumsy. And as I said, I'm much more intentional. So there
Right.
was a method to my madness.
Yeah, and when I heard your TED Talk last year, it was very clear that you thought a lot about the topic that you're speaking on, and it was in the message that really was about inside out. That a lot of the characters of diversity and inclusion come from really the inside of the heart and coming out, as opposed to kind of just training and kind of the external, influences. So, Wendy, why don't you tell us a little bit about your profession right now? So what is it that you do for a living right now?
Yes. So still a bit of a combination, Simeon. I have to make it a little bit complicated for you. But I'm an executive coach at Shopify, and I'm also a team lead of other coaches at Shopify.
Okay. Gotcha.
So that's what I'm doing for most of my time. My coaching business exists.
Yeah.
It's a quiet one. I just work with a few clients here and there because, of course, full-time, I'm a full-time coach for Shopify, so that takes up most of my time. And of course, I also do some professional speaking, as you already mentioned.
Yeah, right. And would you say that the training that you provide is more around technical or more around the leadership aspect of what you've been talking about so far?
Oh, definitely the leadership aspect. So now, it's interesting. You said, would I describe it as more technical? And there are some that would describe leadership as craft as a technical element. So maybe technical in a different way. So when I think of leadership, I think of, yes, certain qualities that each of us have and want to develop around character, but I also think of specific skills and of developing in the craft of leadership. So when I think of the craft of leadership, that's what I would say falls into the technical category.
Right. And so what differentiates your, I mean, this goes to sort of the second question about how did you move from the career path to where you are today, right? You talked about Forrest Gump being one of your, the movies that would describe. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, what a journey. It's so strange, when people ask me questions like that. Like, often people will ask me, how did you get into coaching? And I think, gee, how do I answer that? I have to tell you my life story. In a sense, though,
yeah,
I was always a coach without knowing it. I was the kid at the bus stop that everybody stopped and wanted to ask questions of and asked help of. And at the time, I didn't really understand what that meant. Now I realize that I think I was just perceived as someone curious enough to want to hear people's stories and to want to listen to them. And before I go on, I'm just checking in with you, Simeon, to make sure, again, that you can see me because you dropped off camera.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you're still there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Yeah, I've got the power to put both of us or just you on.
Good. So you were doing that intentionally. All right. Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
of course. You're the spotlight. You're the guest.
Beautiful.
Okay,
whatever works for you. Now that I know it was intentional, we're all good.
Yeah.
What was I saying? I was talking about, my career journey. So I started out as a BCom major, finance major. Took the thing that was practical, that I could get into, that I could afford. I stayed home to go to university. And my parents were big on me taking business because they thought it was a practical degree that would allow me to find a job and get out from under their roof. And I still use a lot of that today. But once I got out of school, I thought, okay, what do I want? I don't really want to work in finance. I found that too technical. At least I perceived it would be too technical. And so I started, my first job out of school was actually as an insurance underwriter. And at the company that I
Okay.
worked at, now I
All
know
right.
you're going to say, but that's technical, Wendy. But at the company I worked at, the underwriters also did all of their own sales and marketing. So it was a wonderful first job because I got to learn something technical, learn a craft. And then I also had to do all of my own marketing, build relationships with brokers and that kind of thing. And then I also got to manage my own little book of business, we called it. So I got the entrepreneurial bug very early. And then as things progressed, I decided it was the relationship piece of that I enjoyed the most. And so that's how I transitioned into tech sales, which I did for, I don't know how many years, maybe 18 years. I've lost count. I worked at companies like Oracle and
years.
Yeah, many, many years. And as you know, that's a hard driving, high demand business. You're on quota. You may be handling opportunities that are multi-million dollars in revenue and potential revenue for the organization. And so it was a lot of fun, a lot of responsibility, and I enjoyed that. But I got to the point where I just wanted to do something more meaningful. And I know you can relate to this because we're TED Talk partners, and I've heard your story about some of these things. And
sure,
you know, sales was great. The relationships was fun, good pay, lots of exposure, challenging. But I just wanted to do something that was more personal, more meaningful. And that felt, when I look back, I could say I made more of a difference.
Sure.
And so I started to study the Doctor of Heilkunst Medicine program. And that's a 4-year full-time program. Crazy, crazy thing that I did, Simeon. I did that while working full-time.
Right.
So luckily the classes...
Can you tell me a little bit more about that specific area of study? Because I haven't heard of it, but that's just because of my small world. So,
well, it's not even because you're a small world. Most people I meet still have not heard of it. There's not a lot of marketing around it. But Heilkunst is a German word, and it means the art and science of making one whole. And so it deals with the whole person, the physical level, nutrition, the emotional and mental level, counseling, coaching, sort of a psychological aspect. And it also understands the influence of soul spiritual issues on our experience in the world, and sort of brings those all together. And so when you're working with a person, you're working with them on every level.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And that was a 4-year program, did you say?
It's a 4-year program, the same number of hours of study as your average 4-year undergrad. Luckily, they were offering the in-class portions on weekends. So I would go to school from 9 to 5 on Saturday and Sunday. And
gotcha.
And luckily, I had a very supportive husband, still have that husband. And he had to learn how to braid kinky hair, my 2 girls, and do things like that I couldn't do on the weekends when I was at class. But what a fabulous change. I mean, you know, when you talk about career journey, this is something I could never have anticipated or planned when I was doing that BCom, you know, many years before that. But that was really what opened me up to the current version of me, you could say. And that introduced the idea of coaching, because once I started to practice in that clinic, I recognized that it was the mental, emotional work that I loved the most. And I turned the business into a coaching business, got coaching training, and here we are.
And so it wasn't so much of the aspects of what you had learned and acquired. I can't believe it was for 18 years that you did that, first of all. That's amazing. But I can imagine that through that journey, you probably got an understanding of the corporate mindset, right? And so a lot of the, I would say, is some of the struggles that people went through that could relate to, and you could use that in your coaching.
You're so right. It comes in extremely handy in my coaching, because when I'm hearing all of the business challenges, the leadership challenges, the team challenges, all of the typical challenges that anyone is going to have in business, I can personally relate to them. And, you know, as a coach, we don't have to be able to do the job of the person we're coaching. You know, a good coach can coach anyone at any level. But the reality is that having that business context makes it a lot easier for me to understand really quickly
Right.
what a client's talking about and be able to relate to their challenge, just because I have a lot of the
Yeah.
lived experience that they're going through.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. There's a language that you can speak that lends you credibility, first of all, but then also enables you to kind of really understand the question behind the question, right? Often.
Yeah.
I love the title of your book, first of all. But before we go there, and I would love for you to walk us through, why did you write this book and what is it about? Before we get there, I'm a big believer in using weaknesses and failures to help drive career and career decisions. And can you share with us maybe, one or two weaknesses that you had discovered along the way that told you something about yourself, perhaps that kind of has steered you towards this career direction now? And maybe you don't have any
Sure.
weaknesses.
You'd have to ask my husband if you want the real list, or my daughters. They'll tell you. Well, first I got to challenge you a little bit, because I'm a coach, so I have to challenge the word weakness. And it's not that I don't believe I don't have any. It's just that, I want to encourage your listeners to think about it as an opportunity. So, when we have a weakness, it can kind of feel negative and heavy. And instead of weakness, I just like to use like growth opportunities or growth edges or development path, because the reality is none of us will ever be perfect. None of us. And so there's always going to be things to work on. And, to answer your question now, I'd say a big one for me is still, after all this time, I'm getting better and better at it, but it's about letting things go. My husband often says to me, Wendy, let it go. And it's really good advice, because, fairness is very important to me for all sorts of reasons. And particularly if I've been treated badly, if I've been treated in an unfair way or with disrespect or disregarded, I would say that's one of my lifelong things that I need to work on. I'm way better at it now than I was 20 years ago, but it's still there, and I'll probably never reach perfection on it. Like I said, none of us are perfect.
Right. Did part of letting that go also mean that you had to let go of some of your skills, for example, that that you had used for your bread and butter? Because it sounds like you were doing a lot of client related work, but it was more technical things, right? Was it easy so you could do life coaching?
Very easy. and it's funny that you say give it up, because when I think of it, I don't think about having to give up anything.
Right.
The way I look at it is kind of like building blocks. So, I was in tech sales for all these years, and that created this nice foundation. And then I just built on top of that and added more skills, more exposure, more lived experience. So I've never really thought of it as giving something up. I've just thought of it as growing and adding to.
Gotcha. So it's, when I with you and when I hear you in your talks, right? There is a certain natural posture that you hold that is a coaching. It's a very reassuring kind of tone that you take, and sometimes I think that these things may not be easily teachable, right? Something that kind of you have to dig inside within you and bring out. And for me, that's a gift. If you have a really great coach that is sympathetic, but at the same time will challenge you on that, because I'm sure a lot of clients that you have will be very, lacking of confidence, because they might have areas that they feel are perceived weaknesses, right? And you're telling them to turn that around and sometimes let go of that to be able to get forward. So that's wonderful. Okay, let's move to your book. I'm very intrigued by the title about peaceful leadership. I guess first of all, tell us, what was the genesis of this book? Why did you write it?
Yeah. So I used to think that the reason I was going to write the book was simply to help me promote my coaching business. When I started it, I was full-time in the coaching business. And as you know, it can be hard to maintain a consistent income when you're self-employed, particularly in a services business, right? Because every time you're delivering your content, you're not out there building your pipeline of potential clients. So I thought that I'd started it just to build my business, but what I realized once I got into it was actually I just had something to say. I had some ideas, some thoughts, some things that I was seeing in my practice, some things that I'd experienced in business that I just wanted to get out there and share.
Right.
And, you know,
Sure.
Earlier when you said you took 6 years to write it, I really didn't, because when I went to work for Nokia in 2015, I was 90% finished the book. But then life got in the way, work got in the way, a whole bunch of things got in the way. And the book was just sitting on the shelf until I visited it later.
Right. And your life was going on as the book was sitting on the shelf, and probably iterations later, right? By the time you picked it up again, it was a different story, perhaps, right? So, yeah, I often wonder about, authoring books, right? It's, do you follow a template that says, here's the final message that I want to convey to my readers, but I need to start somewhere. Like, tell me about that journey, about how you decided where to begin.
Yeah. I really started with probably less of a structure than I think most people might start with for a book. I kind of just drafted all of the rough ideas that I thought I'd want to share. Again, themes that I saw coming up in client conversations. And then what I did was I just drafted about a bunch of points, putting them on paper against all of those themes. And if you look at the book, you'll see that it's in very short sections. There are a lot of small, brief, sometimes half a page, 1 page brief sessions with different subheadings. Because what started to happen was that I realized I want people to be able to come back to it and refer to it. Instead of a book that you read once and stick on the shelf, it's kind of a book that you read through once, but then you go, oh, what was that concept about the false ego again? Let me look at that chapter. Oh, yeah, it's that section. So it's amazing how the creative process can end up in a very different place than you started. I would have expected it to be much more prose-like when I started, but it ended up being more of a guide with short, pithy sections. At least I hope that's how it's perceived.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you summarize the book then in maybe a paragraph, right? You're introducing the book. How would you introduce the book?
Yeah, I'd say that you want us to look at it, your title for today's session, Leadership from the Inside Out. I almost called it that, by the way. But it's a book that says, hey, when we think about leadership, we often look outside of ourselves at leading others. And what I'd like you to do as a leader is to take a step back and look within. Look within. Understand who you are. Understand what your challenges and edges are, your growth opportunities. Because when you do that, what happens is your ability to lead becomes a lot more peaceful, as you see in the title. You attain this authenticity and alignment within yourself that people naturally want to connect with. And so leadership becomes a lot easier. Right,
sure. Bella, I wanted to ask you about, the whole idea of the peaceful leadership. Did that come about because you were seeing a turbulence of leadership? And that's kind of a pushback against, it needs to be peaceful. But at the same time, as you said earlier, you were challenging what I said about weakness. At the same time, there's got to be a bit of a contra kind of, is it peaceful because of turbulence? Why do you call it peaceful?
Yeah, the reason peace came into it is that, again, when I was full-time in the business, I started signing off these little videos I was doing, to build my client base with the word peace. And the reason that happened is that so many people I was working with and supporting were not at peace, right? Even if they were ascending in their careers, et cetera, they were not at peace. And so I thought, well, there's something there for people. There's, as you move up in an organization or as you expand your sphere of influence, Why does it have to become more chaotic? Why does it have to become less peaceful? Why do you have to feel more and more stress? You don't necessarily. You do need to work on yourself and grow so that you can handle more and keep that peace within how you show up in the world. And so that's where it came from. It just came from what I was seeing with my clients.
Sure. Gotcha. And so the ideal leader in your mind has got a good mixture of what personalities. And I'm sure in your book you discuss about the qualities of leadership, but what would be a good mix, you know, combination of peace and what else?
So believe it or not, I actually don't speak to that in the book deliberately.
Okay.
So I deliberately stay away from like a specific set of skills that you need to be a leader, because a million other books have done that. That's been done.
Right. Sure.
What I do encourage, though, is more about getting to know yourself, understanding what your edges are, understanding, for example, the concept of false ego. When you start to understand that we all have a false ego, that's part of ourselves that is externally focused, that cares what others think, that worries, that judges certain emotions as negative, that kind of thing, then you can start to separate that out from the true you, the true person. So instead of talking about this set of skills to emulate, what I'm talking about is going within, and this is where everyday genius comes from, getting to know yourself and your gifts. So I'm not going to name them for you, right? I can help you see them as a coach. And I hope that when people read the book, they start to uncover for themselves what their superpowers are and what their special gifts are and what I call their everyday genius is. Everybody has these things. It's just a question of uncovering them.
Right. And yeah, listeners, type in hashtag everyday genius, hashtag inside out. I mean, these terms have been used often before, but I think in a very unique way, you've decided to intentionally not tackle the skills, not to learn as a tools, you know, things that many people write about, but instead you're challenging the reader to think about their own personal journey, their own personal, and come up with what they need, right? So me as a leader might be different than you in the profile that we have to, you know, that enables us to be, I would like to say, a peaceful leader kind of a thing. Let me ask you one more thing about this, the element of what you're saying here. Are there qualities though that are kind of common among leaders that you appreciate, leaders that you look up to? Are there certain things that kind of stand out that make an authentic leader, you know, someone that you look up to, and what would those be? I know you want to talk about skills, but help me understand that.
Yeah, well, you named one of them, and you said authentic. And for me, when I can see that someone is being authentic, to me, that's attractive. Here's the thing. I think for most people, even if they don't identify that as something they admire, they do subconsciously. From what I've studied, when someone is in alignment, physically, emotionally, and soul spiritually, that shows. That comes up. Other people connect with that, whether they realize they're connecting with that or not. I talk about that in the book. And so for me, it is that authenticity. It's that willingness to, you know, authentic means talking about the kinds of things you and I are talking about right now. When you're asking me, Wendy, what are your weaknesses? You know, what are the things that you need to develop? What are the things that you want to work on? Acknowledging that we're not perfect, that there's always something to work on. Those are the kinds of leaders that I'm interested in. The ones that show their vulnerabilities, don't pretend to be perfect, and don't pretend to know it all. Because none of us do.
Gotcha. Yeah. So the audience that is, tell me about how a younger audience, younger professional would use this book versus someone who is more seasoned as a professional, because as coaches, we get a wide range of clients, right? So for 5 to 10 years, looking at this book, how can it help them build it? And then we'll talk about the season, folks.
Sure. For a younger audience, I would say it is a wonderful way to start your career. Honestly, I wish I had, maybe not my book, maybe there's a stronger author out there or someone with better ideas to share. I don't know. But I wish that I had something like this when I was younger, because, I went for so long doing what you were talking about, like looking at specific skills, looking at qualifications, looking at things outside of myself to find my way instead of looking internal. Now, again, it's not that these skills, designations, certifications aren't important. Of course, we need to learn things. We need to develop certain skills. But as a young person, this book is a great way to step back from all the things you've been hearing about, study maths and sciences because we have a shortage of engineers. It's true, we do, we will. We have a shortage now, and we're going to continue to have a shortage. And if it's not meaningful for you to do that work, you're probably going to leave it anyway. And so for young people, I'd say it's really important to step back, read the book, read other books, get to know yourself, get to know what you're passionate about, get to know what is meaningful for you.
Sure.
You've been through this too, right? I mean, you've been through these career changes because I think you and I have had a similar reckoning in having to look within and say, what's really important to me? What do I want? So for younger people, I would say that's how to use it. And even if you didn't read the book, if you're early on in your career, find a way to step back and get to know what is meaningful to you and work from there.
Yeah, and as you're speaking, I think there might be an idea for a follow-on book on, young people sometimes say to me, I don't even know where to start for passion because I haven't been working for very long. But I've always hinged upon the fact that I'm going to be an engineer or coder, and so how do I decide on that? And I think that's probably another topic. I'm sure you have an opinion about that. But there might be a follow-up book, sort of, a peaceful leadership for, for students or something like that. So, of which I'd love to be a co-author if you. But anyway, Mike. So, what about for more seasoned executives? So, your peers or colleagues or other people that you've been coaching that are more senior. How should they use this book? Are they introspective as well? But specifically, is there anything else?
Yeah, I think for more senior people, it can be sort of a manual of what you need to reset. It's like coming back to the true you. Again, I know you can relate to this because of your career journey. It's easy to get lost in all of the skills and the ways of being that have been prioritized in the organizations you've worked in. So for senior people, I would say this is a way to unlearn some of those unconscious habits that are holding you back, and a way to come back to the true you, come back to the true self, and to find that everyday genius that was always there and you probably knew about in your teens and your early 20s, but have forgotten about.
Right. Sure. Yeah. And also I would say probably the addition of the expectation, of people around you to be a certain way. So if you're in consulting for many years, I was in corporate consulting, there's a certain aspect of being a senior manager or partner that you almost have to be, because there's that expectation from the culture of that company that you're going to be like that. And if you're not, you sort of stick out like a sore thumb, and you may not encounter some difficulties in your career, right? So that's a fast reset and kind of going back to the basics, right? So, and a lot of the coaching, I'm sure you have the same experience, is really dissecting back to, can you tell me about a time where you did a small project, and you're talking about an executive here now, a small project that you were very proud of, but you put on your resume because it didn't make sense for that role, right? And it's funny to hear the answer sometimes, because it might be a very personal story, and yeah, I mean, it goes basic. So I love that. Is there anything else about your book that you want to share with everyone to make sure that they understand and and they'll pick up.
Yeah, it's an easy read, it's a fast read, and it's easy to refer to. I, like everyone else, have a long list of books that I want to read, and I don't get to most of them, truth be told. I just don't. And that's another reason it's formatted the way it is, so that it's easy to pick up. It's easy to put down for a few months and come back to without losing your place because of the way it's organized. And so that's why it's designed that way. And I hope it serves busy professionals, because none of us, I think, have time to read all the books we want to read.
Right. Well, that sounds exciting. And for those who are listening, tuning in, if you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat box. For those who are watching the rebroadcast, you connect with Wendy online on LinkedIn, and any questions you have for her, do feel free to reach out to her. She also has an awesome TED Talk that I'll put a link to as well. Let me switch gears a little bit. You give to young people and to more seasoned professionals in and outside of your work, what are one or two tips that you would say for them, practically speaking, without having read your book, but you'd say, hey, listen, when I was your age, or in your phase of life, focus on these things, right? So a couple of tidbits that you want to share.
Sure. I'd say don't listen to people like you and I. Don't listen to all the people who are older who are telling you what to do. Connect with yourself and explore your interests. And that's what I tell both my daughters. One is turning 21, the other one's 23. And I can remember, for example, when my older one was in high school, the guidance counselor hauled us into the office one day and said, why so much focus on the arts? Where are the maths and sciences, etc. And, I had to have a tough conversation with that guidance counselor to say, listen, I understand where you're coming from. You're trying to help prepare her for the world and be practical and give her things where there's going to be jobs, to focus on where she can find a job. And I know her, and she knows herself, and we both know that she's got a strong artistic sensibility. That painting, I don't know if everyone can see it in the background, that was a self-portrait that she did in high school. I'm sitting in her former bedroom. So, I think it was really important for her to have that space to explore her interests without thinking about the practical realities at that point. And of course, we do have to think about the practical realities at the right time. But what I've seen from all the people that I've worked with is that it starts more with exploring what you love. And if you go from there, you will find a way to make money at it.
Right, for sure. And I have to apologize to you. I think there's some construction going on outside, so you're going to hear some metal scraping. But that's wonderful. Yeah, I think so. Young people don't listen to us. Awesome.
Yeah.
Basically lost about 40% of sales, but I'm sure that's not what you're going for. Okay, I think we've talked about sort of the senior folks as well, about going back to the basics and kind of reflecting back on what their superpowers are. I guess my question to you is, before we do the fire questions, is what is your plan for the future? I know you'll continue working at Shopify as a coach and all of that, but are you thinking about already a follow-on book, or what do you have in store as a next project?
Yeah. So short term, yes, it's to continue at Shopify, to continue to do a lot of coaching and some speaking. I have some ideas for follow-on books. Believe it or not, I actually have an idea for a fiction. I don't know where that is yet. It's still kind of percolating, but we'll see. Yeah, maybe something that's a little bit more creative.
Right. Or maybe a play or a drama or something. Challenges the conventional of big bad corporate. Yeah, that's great. Well, I look forward to that greatly, and I think when I think about your journey going from learning the technical, right? So I didn't know that you were B-commerce, first of all, and I didn't know that you were in finance. It's great to hear that, because I can see that journey kind of shifting. And, as you kind of carried along, you were finding probably more of what you loved, your passion, and kind of honing in on the skills those skills, right? And sort of being willing to let go of the other skills. Like I asked earlier about the finance, it was easy for you to throw out the door because you didn't love it to begin with. So now it's culminating in this book. And so I think it's a really nice, bookend, right?
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. So I love to end off with sort of wrap ups, and
Okay.
it's unfair. I gave you the questions ahead of time, and I'm not going to do that in future. So, but I don't know if you've thought about it. But okay, so
I don't even know if
what is your
but we'll see.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so what is your alter ego profession? What would you were
Alter ego. Oh, so tough to choose one. If I was younger, professional athlete, maybe a tennis player or a soccer player,
okay?
or a novelist.
All right.
See, fiction.
It's never too late to pick
Isn't
up a sport. Well, I'm an MMA aficionado. I love martial arts. There's a couple of my favorite people who started when they're old. So, I mean, and anyway, I mean, I'm not aging either, or you, but I'm just saying it's never too late. Okay, all right.
yeah.
What's one word? What's one word that you love? One word.
Peace. The word peace.
Yeah.
P-E-A-C-E, not P-I-E-C-E. And, even when I said it, my shoulders drop a little. When you say the word peace,
Yeah.
you just feel peaceful. It's nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so needed right now, right? It's always needed, but especially with all the tension around COVID, for sure. What's one word that you hate?
I do remember what I thought about for that one. You know what word I don't like? Hero. And
Okay.
the reason is I don't like that we decide certain people are heroes and certain people aren't. And maybe that speaks again to this concept of everyday genius. I love the idea that there is something special within all of us. And when we talk about heroes, what we're saying is some people are special and some people aren't. And in my view, everyone is special.
Right.
Everyone has their everyday genius, their personal brand of genius. So I'm not a big fan of the word hero.
Wow. Okay. I guess you don't watch half of the blockbuster movies then from Marvel or DC Comics, because but it really is true. When you put together a team of people who have different attributes that they're strong in, and I guess if you called them to be sort of their mini heroes put together, that's what a superhero is, right? Is people bringing together their skills and their passion, and I talk a lot about when I'm trying to convey, value proposition, right? So what value do you bring to the table that is unique to you, and it's valuable, right? And that's great. Okay, so now I know I won't use hero around you. What is hero? All right. Anyway, okay. So what? Last questions. What hobbies have you picked up during COVID?
So the big one has been making kombucha. Do you know what kombucha is?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
A fermented drink, right? So you can buy it, of course, but I've been making my own. So, I had a few failed attempts at making the SCOBY. That's the culture that ferments the drink. And then I had to cheat and I bought a SCOBY. But then I've been making my own and trying different flavors with fruit and things like that. So that's been fun. I also got back into golf. I love golfing, but hadn't golfed for many years. So I got back into that. And I have an e-bike on order. So I'm excited to start cycling again.
You have an e-bike? Okay.
Yeah, it's on order. It's on a truck somewhere. It's on its way here.
And is that a stationary bike?
No, it's a bike that you ride outside, but it has a battery and it has power
Okay.
built in to assist you when you're tired, so you can go for much longer rides.
Okay. Okay. Oh, I
Yeah,
see what you're saying. Yes, those that sort of have that halfway point where you kind of pedal and you don't, right? I was thinking,
exactly.
when you want when you want to cheat, you don't pedal. When you feel like you want to work out, then you pedal. That's
Exactly. If
great.
I'm riding with
Well, Wendy,
someone
it's been
faster than me, I keep up.
Yeah, that's great for Ubering, right? And for skip the dishes and all that right now. So that's great.
Yeah.
Well, Wendy, thank you so much for your time today. It was wonderful speaking with you, and we will be in touch as we always are, I'm sure. And for those of you who are tuning in either now or on the rebroadcast, make sure you do check out Wendy's book. The title is below, and I'll also be putting it in the link afterwards as well. So, Wendy, thanks for coming, joining on, and we'll see you real soon. Have a good weekend.
Thanks a lot, Simeon. This has been fun.
Good. Yeah, we'll have another one when you have your second book out, the fiction.
Okay, I'm
We'll have
hearing the prompts.
a. All right. Take care, Wendy.
Take care.
Wow, that was wonderful. So happy to have her on the show. Been trying to talk with her for ever since last year when we had our TED Talk together. And last year, the theme for the TED Talk was Ignite, actually for last year. And so her story really ignited the crowd that was there. So next week we have another really special guest. His name is David Sanders. And I met David probably about a year ago. He's an ex-partner, senior partner at KPMG. And, I met with him and we did a bit of coaching exercises together, but he'll be on the show next week. And it'll be great speaking with him about his career journey as well. So again, if you're watching the rebroadcast, make sure you reach out to Wendy, reach out to me. Feel free to ask any questions. I'd be glad to answer them. All right. Take care and have a good weekend, everyone.